And only thing we've seen from Carney on autos is an EV strategy that is a flip side. It's a mirror of Justin Trudeau's EV strategy. And Melanie Joly is industry minister saying, we're going to export to Asia and China cars. It's a fantasy.
Yesterday, Pierre Poilievre unveiled a new plan to bring back the North American Auto Pact, aimed at eliminating tariffs and strengthening integrated auto manufacturing across the continent. One of the main authors of that plan is former Conservative MP and industry critic Rick Perkins, who spent years working on manufacturing and industry policy in Parliament. Rick, thanks for joining us on Northern Perspective.
It's great to be back.
So this was a very intriguing press conference that Pierre had. I was really, really impressed with this plan and the fact that he was able to explain it so succinctly. But the fact that you worked on this gives us an opportunity to actually dig into the details a bit on this. So let's just start off at the beginning. How long has this particular policy been in process?
I'd say that we started on it in detail in December. Pierre appointed last summer the Leaders Economic Growth Council, as he called. We spent the summer putting together a council of about 38 CEOs. Greg McLean, the MP from Calgary Centre, is the chair, and Gaetan Millette from Northern Ontario is a co-chair, MP from Northern Ontario, and then myself as the other co-chair. So we spent the summer putting together the council. And then in November, December, and into January, we traveled the country, had 22 cities, and met with 180 different CEOs. Obviously, the auto business and the pressure we're under from the U.S. administration, in particular industries, was a frequent topic, whether it was steel, aluminum, autos, or softwood lumber. And so because of the urgency in particular, well, all three are in dire straits, but we're in this very difficult position with auto. Pierre had asked us if we would focus mainly on developing a new approach on that, which is what we began with industry folks, both union and management, in December.
So the whole point of this policy is to try to revitalize the auto industry in Canada. And from what Pierre was explaining yesterday, it sounds like that the angle that was taken here is to try to align the approach of this policy with the direction of the White House administration in trying to bring manufacturing back to the United States. And what seems to be the approach here is the policy seems to be trying to bring or encourage more manufacturing in the United States, but also in Canada, and make it worthwhile for the United States to have no tariffs on the auto industry. So can you just break down a bit for people watching how that would be achieved in this plan?
Sure. If I could, Ryan, just a little bit of the history, right? So our auto industry was in the dumper in the early 60s, and the Diefenbaker government commissioned a report. What should we do? Government changed, and we ended up in 1965 with what was called the Auto Pact. The Auto Pact was basically both countries had put up tariffs against each other on the auto business, and said the Auto Pact was really our first free trade agreement since before Confederation. We had one with the U.S. before Confederation called Reciprocity, but this was really the first one. Said enough. Let's build the auto industry in Canada and the U.S. together. And it was what's called a performance-based measure. So if you manufactured a certain percentage of vehicles, one vehicle, for example, in Canada, or one vehicle in the US, you could ship another vehicle into the other country. And what happened was we got efficiency. So certain models are made in the US and other models are made in Canada. So the Ford 150, for example, is made in the US, as is the Dodge Ram. And we are the largest export market in the world for those models. About $13 billion a year now is what we have in autos that we import from the United States. So that was in place, and we grew from about 700,000 units that were Canada was making then to the height, 3 million vehicles a year in 1999. Then the interim NAFTA had come about, but the auto pact was still, it was sort of a double-edged two sets of rules. One was under NAFTA and what they had because of Mexico, and the other was under the auto pact. And the auto pact was specific to three companies, the three Detroit Three. That's all it was. And so it got challenged in the World Trade Organization, lost, and so the rules of the auto pact or NAFTA took over in about 2000, 2001, and we've been on a decline ever since from that point, 3 million, now down to 1.2 million vehicles last year. It's been accelerated in the last year. It's dropped dramatically. And that system is not based on performance. The performance being, if you make a vehicle in Canada, you get to bring one in from the other country duty free. It's based on a negotiated number. But with NAFTA, it's also, we have three countries. So that number is based on 75% content in North America and has to be in it for to go duty free. And there's no sort of limit. So what's happened over the years is in Canada and in the US, we make 0.6 of a vehicle now for every full vehicle that we sell in Canada. So we no longer make a vehicle for every vehicle we sell in Canada, we make 0.6 of a vehicle. Mexico makes 2.5 vehicles for every vehicle that is acquired or bought in Mexico. So you've had this imbalance develop over the years between Mexico, Canada, the United States, where because of the lower labor costs, there are labor standards in NAFTA or CUSMA that say they have to do at least $16. But as we know, in North America and the United States and Canada, auto workers make a lot more than $16 an hour. And so you've got this manufacturing imbalance that's happened. So what we're proposing is to go back to a version of the auto pact, but modernized, that says for every vehicle that you make and manufacture in Canada, you get to bring in a vehicle from one of the other two countries duty free. So, and above that, you would have duties paid. So what that does is it moves production basically from Mexico back to the United States and Canada. And within a decade, our projections are that combined with some other initiatives would put us back up to 2 million vehicles a year, which we were before COVID. We were making 2 million vehicles before COVID. Under the Trudeau government, we were making 2 million vehicles. It's not that we've dropped in half in only a few years. And the United States has also seen that decline. So if we can get a win-win for the US and for us, we believe we can get a deal.
Now, this seems to be the type of deal that Donald Trump would at least entertain, because Donald Trump is a businessman. He is acting in a manner that he feels and is in the best interest of the United States. And these are the type of, let's call it a hockey deal or a real hockey trade where both teams get something. Is this also designed to try to appeal to that type of relationship with Donald Trump, where if he sees an actual good business deal, he may pull the trigger on that?
Well, I spent a lot of years in business before I was in politics, and I dealt with lots of folks on Bay Street that were, well, Donald Trump's a unique individual, but they were deal junkies, right? He loves to do deals. And everything he does is about negotiation. And so make no mistake, the positions, the extreme positions that we hear even on the auto industry, is my belief that that's a negotiating position and we should sit down and negotiate. And he needs to get a win. And right now, that imbalance, if it got corrected, went from 0.6 vehicles to 1, the US would move from making 11 million to over 13 million vehicles a year in the United States. And that's a big win. That's his goal, to repatriate automaking. It also recognizes, though, that no matter what Donald Trump says publicly, they need us on autos because we buy $13 billion of vehicles, mainly light, medium duty trucks. We are the only export market for Ford 150s, Ford 250s. We're the only export market for Dodge Rams and all those variations. We are a critical part of the big three's revenue sources. So Those who have given up, and we believe the Liberals have given up on the North American market, and we can talk a bit about why we believe that, think are giving up on an industry that is not only vitally important to us, but an industry where we have some cards to play.
Yeah, and it was interesting hearing some of the questions put to Pierre about this yesterday by both CBC and some of the other folks there, asking, why would the Americans like this? And he was even challenged on, have you spoken to the Detroit CEOs? And Pierre had responded, yes, actually I have. And yes, they are interested in this. To your point, if they could increase production in the United States by almost 20%, why would they say no to that? And we had commented on our live stream last night that this is probably a really interesting approach, because Pierre meeting with the Detroit Big Three and proposing this type of a deal, they then can start to put pressure on Congress and the Senate and internally Donald Trump from the United States side. So it's not just a Canada versus a US conversation. It is a Canada partnering with the US, as we've done for decades, in order to try to get back to this mutually beneficial relationship we have, especially in the auto sector. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, the fact is that we don't make Ford 150s and Rams here, but we import them, and they want that production. It's important. It's 12-13% of U.S. production comes from those kinds of vehicles, and so we there is skin in the game here, as well as the fact that we've got to end these silly policies that have tried to make us holier than thou on a number of issues, and not said, look, uh, uh, the tailpipe emissions don't know the border between Canada and the US. We need to have a North American standard on a variety of things, from tailpipe emissions to cybersecurity, which we don't have. And there are issues around the Chinese manufacturers and their security. We've had countries ban them around military bases for reasons, good reasons, and it's a fantasy to believe. And we've heard Melanie Joly say, we're going to become this big maker of EVs and we're going to be exporting them out to the world. Well, we make 1.2 million vehicles right now, and less than 20,000 of those vehicles are exported outside of the United States to Europe and Asia. So the idea that somehow we would become a massive exporter to something we haven't been able to do in 100 years, and in addition to that, on EVs, China is already dominating the European market and the Asian market with their EVs. The tune of 40 to 50% of sales are now Chinese EVs. Why would they build Chinese EVs here? And you know how the Chinese build EVs outside of China? They build them in China. They're designed in pieces. They take those pieces apart and then they reassemble them somewhere else. So there is no such thing as your traditional thing where we have a massive amount of jobs, 500,000 jobs in the parts business in Canada, building parts for cars. They don't do that. They build the parts in China. They build the sections in China and then reassemble the vehicle here. So you're not manufacturing anything, you're just assembling.
So they have the IKEA model when it comes to auto manufacturing.
100%. If you were here, if BYD came here, and they were in the news last week, if BYD came here, the largest maker in China, they would be sending over the car in prefabricated parts like IKEA and assembling them here with Chinese-made parts. There would be no parts business here, and it'd be an automated process for the most part. So, it's complete fiction what the Liberals are spinning and what can happen to our auto business. And we need to create this North American business. We need to build it back up again. We need to get balance on it, and we need to support our industry and the more than half a million jobs. 500,000 in parts, another 160,000 or so in manufacturing. We have the empty capacity too to do this. It's not like a new plant has to be built. There's actually that much capacity. We used to make 3 million. We're making 1.2 million. Only 5-6 years ago, we were making 2 million. There is room to grow within the existing facilities to do that.
And the benefits are we get more Canadian jobs, more higher paying Canadian jobs. To your earlier point, if we standardize a lot of these things as a North American standard, now potentially the cost of the vehicles goes down because it is standardized and we don't have to be looking at differences across the border. Um, but to your earlier point, why are the Liberals taking this approach, do you think?
uh, well, you're asking me to try and get in the mind of a liberal, which is pretty tough for me to do. But uh, one thing it's trying to find out what the position of the day is. So that is always changing. But if you look at the auto policy that Prime Minister Carney released on February 5th, his new auto policy, it's essentially just an EV policy. And so unlike while Trudeau said by 2035, all vehicles sold in Canada had to be plug-in EVs. Carney has said, oh no, we're getting rid of that. By 2035, 75% of vehicles have to have no tailpipe emissions. So what does that mean? Only plug-in EVs.
Same thing.
It's the same thing, because the only vehicle without a tailpipe emission is a plug-in EV. There is no technology on a commercial basis for consumer vehicles right now that exists. And the amount of lead time between now and 2035, it's not going to happen. So we're talking about an industry that without massive government retail subsidies is basically declined to virtually nothing in Canada. And it's a false industry. If government has to subsidize the retail price of it, then it's not a real industry. It's not a real consumer demand. So we believe that it should be the market that decides it. And Ryan, if you look back at the last 10, 20 years on tailpipe emissions, the internal combustion engine is dramatically more efficient today than it was 20 years ago. Why? Because consumers want better gas mileage. Better gas mileage means lighter vehicles, better engines, better innovation. The market is driving, consumers are driving better and better gas mileage, and the industry is responding by producing more fuel-efficient vehicles, and more fuel-efficient vehicles have less tailpipe emissions. So it's a wonderful thing what the market actually does on its own without the government coming in and saying, well, we'll give you a $5,000 subsidy to buy this car you wouldn't otherwise buy. And the fact is, over time, those subsidies don't work. And you know why they don't work? Because the manufacturers build that price of that subsidy into their margin. And the price goes up so that the price can go down. And the manufacturer keeps a better margin. Anytime the government comes in and tries to mess with the market, you end up with a totally messed up situation like that.
Well, and all that happens is the subsidies end up going into the pockets of the manufacturers, and Canadians end up paying the exact same price of what they would if there were no subsidies. So you're really just enriching the companies, aren't you?
You are. But it's even worse, Ryan, because Carney's policy is all around EVs and this idea of their failed battery assembly strategy, all of those things that we know about. But the only EVs that can come in at the level that he's talking about are Chinese-made EVs. They have manufacturing capability to make 55 million vehicles a year in China. They're making 30 million right now. They've unused capacity of 25 million. So they're using all of that to dump vehicles in our markets to keep artificial employment in China. And those vehicles, Doug Ford's right when he called them spy machines. I mean, think of it. If you've got a new car, what does your new car have? Forgetting about where it comes from. It has microphones. Otherwise, you can't talk through your phone. It's got cameras all around it for traffic, for backing up, for those lane adjusted stuff. And it has databases. Now, you know how the software on cars, because cars are basically a big computer now and a software machine. You know how that software gets updated? You're not plugging in even on your internal combustion engine. They have communication ability. And so what you're talking about is a massive amount of data that these EVs made in China collect and transmit and can transmit back about you and your country and the traffic patterns, and that they can control the vehicle. They can do software upgrades and have software upgrades where they can shut your vehicle down in the middle of the 401. They have that capability if they choose to do it. And so we've never had a cyber security standard in our national automobile transportation standards, and neither does the United States. So that's why, as part of the policy that Pierre announced this week on autos, he said we want to create a North American harmonized cybersecurity standard for all vehicles in order to ensure that they are safe, that your privacy is protected, but also that foreign countries can't get control of your vehicles and your data and do whatever they might want to do with it. And as a starting point, in addition to having that in our automobile standards, we're also saying for now, we're going to ban Chinese and Russian software in those cars. You can't bring the cars in without it. We've already seen the perverse impacts of Carney's new policy. So when the government introduced 100% tariff on Chinese-made EVs, Tesla was selling 49,000 vehicles in Canada a year, and they were all made in China. So they quickly shifted, and the vehicles for the last 2 years have been coming in from their manufacturing facilities not in China. I'm told through the industry that most of the Tesla Model 3s that were in Canada that were non-China made have now been shipped down to the US because US has actually banned Chinese software. And the vehicles that will be coming in from Tesla again are made from China under the 49,000 limit that Carney has set for this year, and then growing to 70,000. Make no mistake, once they're here, 70,000, everybody says, hey, Rick, it's only 70,000 vehicles. You know, we buy 2 million vehicles in Canada a year. That's not very much. It's nothing. Said, yeah, well, that's not the way China operates. And I can tell you, when we hit that 70,000 ceiling, there's going to be tariffs again on canola unless we remove that ceiling. Because once they're here, China is going to use all their coercive economic strategies that they always do, mainly canola, but also targeting seafood in my part of the country now, as a tariff barrier to try and convince the politicians to change their mind on a policy issue. So there is no idea that they'll only be limited to 70,000 as the Liberals would have you believe. That's false. That isn't going to happen, because they will give in on the 70,000 because they'll try and keep the canola tariffs off. And now we're in a position where in Brazil, Chinese EVs are 90% of the sales. They're almost 50% of the sales in Europe. Like, that's what happens when you're producing vehicles for below cost, trying to keep a huge workforce employed, and you don't have the profit motive for those companies to actually make money.
Well, and then you put yourself in a strategically dangerous situation where what happens if China decides to hold your automotive, transportation in your country hostage, right? What if they say, well, you have to do this, otherwise we're shutting down every single car that is in your country? And people say, well, that's just conspiracy theory. Well, we did a story on this, and some of the Chinese electric buses in Norway, they actually found SD cards that were hidden inside the bus that would allow China to upload anything they wanted to the operating system, or, to your point, they could shut it down, they could control the bus. And it's not like someone just overlooked this. They were deliberately not told about this when they actually put them in a Faraday cage and tried to understand what kind of communication was coming out of these vehicles. And some of the military in other countries outside of Canada have told their employees, if you're going to be buying these vehicles, you cannot bring them more than 2 miles close to one of our bases. This is a real concern out there for people, and we should be looking at China's behavior. Listen to the Hogue Report, everybody. Like, it was Trudeau's own Hogue Report where they were talking about how much China was interfering within our society and in our elections. Never mind the diaspora, never mind what's going on in Vancouver, but operating like this and allowing China to just have free reign of our auto industry, to your point, I think there is a long game that China is playing. They always do play a long game, and I think it's a dangerous approach to take if you allow them to play it without any opposition whatsoever.
Israel and the UK have banned them from infrastructure and military sites because of their surveillance capabilities and other elements about that. You know, like that's a worrying thing, right? That you think they're saying, "Well, wait a minute. If the UK doesn't want these around key infrastructure and and military bases, and they've done the tearing apart of the vehicles to figure this stuff out, why hasn't the Canadian government done that before allowing them in this country? They haven't, and China's not a country that imports finished goods. China's a country that imports raw material from Canada. So the idea that we'd be selling China anything other than raw materials and critical minerals to help them sell back these cars to Canada, again, it boggles the mind. Think of it, like we were making just 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 2 million vehicles in Canada, and somehow we think that we're going to sell 2 million vehicles to other markets outside of the United States when we haven't been able to do that for 100 years. Like it's to me, it's irresponsible of politicians to be letting the public, leading the public along in that way and saying, oh, no, no, we can replace this industry. We cannot replace the North American industry. And we should be doing everything we can to try and get a deal. And we believe a deal is possible. In fact, that a deal is that we've got a policy that helps the U.S. auto business in the way that President Trump wants it. And the meetings that Pierre had with the leadership of both Ford and GM on Friday showed that they were pretty keen on this policy and thought that it would be very helpful for them. And, you know, the only reason Stellantis folks were in Washington lobbying on their business. Otherwise, he would have had a meeting with Stellantis as well. But that's the crazy thing that some of the pushback from is, well, why wasn't he doing this a year ago? Well, you know what? The prime minister said he could get a deal. He could get a better deal. He lays credit for the deal we have now, claiming somehow credit that we've got the best deal in the world. Well, that's thanks to Brian Mulroney. Like, we should have something a little more modern than Brian Mulroney. We have a NAFTA agreement, and almost all of that agreement that gets all of our goods duty-free into the United States now is because of the 1989-1990 NAFTA agreement, not because of anything Mark Carney's done. And we gave him a year. I think a year is a lot. If you're going to build things in record speeds like we've never seen before, a year was a long time. And he's got nothing. He's done nothing. He's said nothing except open up some bureaucratic offices. But he hasn't done anything in the auto business other than say, well, we can't get anything down there, so let's try and do a deal with China. And we'll get manufacturing from China. No, you won't. You'll get assembly, maybe, of pre-manufactured parts here. It will be a shadow of an auto industry. It won't be a real auto industry. A real auto industry is where you make the car, you make the parts, you make the engine, you make the drivetrain here, not those parts made halfway around the world, shipped here in a container, and then assembled by a robotic arm. That's not an auto industry.
Well, it sounds like a plan that could work. Sounds like a plan that should be appetizing to the Americans. And what's the next step for this? Does this need to go to Mark Carney and be proposed to him and say, listen, here's your solution. Go ahead, make it happen. Or is there a different approach that needs to be taken here?
I think, well, you know, this week, Pierre's in the United States. He's in Texas, on his way to Texas to talk about energy, then more broader relationship speech in New York towards the end of this thing. We will continue pushing forward that we believe that if you want to be the adult in the room, which the Liberals claim to be, you actually come up with real unemotional solutions, recognizing that the United States, we are blessed in having our geography and that beautiful map behind you and everything that comes with that. And there isn't a country in the world that wouldn't switch geographic places with us, not only because we have the most beautiful country in the world and some of the smartest people in the world, but because we're next to the largest market in the world. Like, there's no comparison. The United States is a third bigger in the economy than China. It's not a rival. And having access to that market drives our prosperity. And for those who have given up on a deal, why? Why would you give up? Why not? Like, I'm not saying get a deal at any cost. I'm not there. This is what the liberals throw back. Oh, you want a deal at any cost? No, but go and negotiate. And you know what? I have no doubt that the administration may be ragging the puck a bit to do some things around the midterms and all of that. I get that, but we should be having a public debate. And only thing we've seen from Carney on autos is an EV strategy that is a flip side. It's a mirror of Justin Trudeau's EV strategy. And Melanie Joly is industry minister saying we're going to export to Asia and China cars. It's a fantasy. It's a fantasy of goods playing on people's emotion, but not sitting back and saying, what is it that we realistically do over the long haul, long after you and I are gone from this beautiful earth? Our relationship is still going to be with the United States. Our economy is still going to be with the United States. And presidents and prime ministers come and go, but our geography and all we've been blessed with is there, and we can supply the world with everything it needs. And that'll happen. Like, it's a negotiation, folks. So negotiate. And if the other guy's not willing to negotiate right now, it's going to be tough, and it is tough. We've seen a dramatic drop in the first month of this year in our auto jobs. The 25% tariffs that President Trump imposed and the retaliatory tariffs that on auto, the retaliatory tariffs that Prime Minister Carney proposed are having an impact, right? What we had a year ago, because I've got friends with car dealerships, what we had a year ago in the run up to Liberation Day was a lot of people pre-ordering, getting their cars, including me. I bought a car before April 2nd. Well, you could still get it tariff-free because it was coming, the model I was getting was manufactured in the US and it came here, my local dealership. And so you get some lag effect of that. And we're seeing some of that now, right? That the sales are down in the first quarter, and they're down because a lot of people were worried and bought vehicles. But look, we need to persevere. We've got a few more months to go. You know, the negotiations start in earnest in July. You know, hopefully we'll have a deal before that. In terms of the policy, it's out there for the Liberals to take, please. They've taken just about every other policy we've put forward. The only decent ideas they seem to have are the ones that they do from ours. And when they do those, you see a benefit. So, you know what, if they need better ideas on how to negotiate a deal, take our deal on the autos and go and show that it's a win-win, sell it. We're happy with that. If it results in a better auto industry for our country and more prosperity and 2 million vehicles in the next decade, I hope they take it. If they don't take it, I don't see that any other route will generate anything other but continued decline in our auto business.